Chapters 2 and 3 from Stories from Bygone Years are entitled Land of Maple Leaves. So we have the stories of these two chapters told by two AI professors.
All right, ready to dive in? Chapters 2 and 3 of this memoir. 1957. This young man, he's leaving Hong Kong, heading to Queen's University. What a journey. 18 days at sea, just to start. Kobe, Yokohama, Tokyo. Even mentions those Japanese taxi drivers, a little wild, huh? What struck you about his first impressions?
You know, it's like he's walking into a completely different world. The Golden Pavilion in Kyoto, the Imperial Palace Gardens, Tokyo. He's mesmerized. But Honolulu, that's where he really lights up.
You can almost feel the sunshine in his words, right? It makes you wonder, did that taste of the Pacific stay with him? Even as he's heading to a whole different coast, a whole different world in Ontario.
Totally. And speaking of journeys, he's just getting started. Honolulu, San Francisco, then a train across Canada. But first, a little detour to Vancouver. Ever had one of those chance encounters that turns into something special?
Well, tell me about it.
That's what happens with the Leung family. Friends of a friend, taking him in, showing him around. And get this, they introduce him to a UBC English professor. Turns out this professor knows someone in Queens. Talk about serendipity.
It's those unexpected connections, right? Life's funny that way.
Absolutely. But then it's time for the solo leg of the journey, the Eastward Express. Just him, his trunk, suitcase, the whole bit. I think that's when it hits him. He's really on his own now.
Stepping into the unknown.
Exactly.
And what a journey that train ride must have been. The Canadian Rockies, the prairies stretching on forever, those vast, vast landscapes.
A crash course in the scale of Canada, for sure. But more than that, it's about him finding his own way, leaving everything familiar behind.
He finally reaches Kingston, this little city, limestone buildings, Queen's University. But before he can even think about classes, he's got to find a place to live. And let me tell you, it's not easy.
No kidding. Landlords, prices, the whole 9 yards. He makes it sound like an Olympic sport.
This is 1957, right? No apps, no websites, just him and a list from the university.
Mountains of luggage, probably.
Talk about resourcefulness. He eventually finds a room, Queen Street, I think he said, but even that comes with its own story.
Because that's where the connections come back in.
Yeah.
Remember how we were talking about serendipity? Turns out his roommate, another student, but also a graduate of Pui Ching. His high school, back in Hong Kong. What are the chances?
Small world, isn't it?
They decide to split the rent, make things a little easier. And you know what? That roommate becomes a lifelong friend.
There's something about those bonds forged in the fire, you know. So he's found a friend, a place to live, time to experience Queens, right? He describes Kingston late 1950s. This charming little town, Princess Street, that was the heart of it all. No high-rises back then, just shops, cinemas, that university vibe.
He's got an eye for detail, doesn't he? 12 minutes, his walk from home to campus, Wong's lunch on Division Street, 55 cents for fish and chips.
Makes you want to hop in a time machine almost.
Right. And then there's Queens itself. All those limestone buildings.
Yeah.
The Student Memorial Union, Douglas Library. He even named some of the academic buildings.
He's walking us through his memories.
Exactly. And we can't forget about RMC, the Royal Military College. It was right there too. Cadets in uniform, a constant reminder of tradition, discipline. Quite a contrast to Queens, I'd imagine.
Speaking of contrast, how about that freshman orientation, huh? Forget icebreakers and name tags. We're talking head shaving, tomato fights.
Mandatory kills.
And Godiva's hymn. I had to look up the lyrics on that one.
We are the engineers. We can demolish 40 beers. Something like that. Wild times.
Different era, that's for sure. But hey, it was all about bonding, belonging.
Exactly. And that brings us back to those connections. That group of students from Hong Kong. They had each other's backs, navigating this new world together.
Those friendships that last a lifetime.
Powerful stuff. But from camaraderie and kilts, we're thrown headfirst into the academic pressure cooker. This is Queen's engineering in the 1950s, folks. 9 to 11 courses a year.
No electives either. Geology, economics, the whole shebang.
They weren't messing around back then. And the workload. Finals, that constant pressure to keep a 75 average.
He makes it clear that was no easy feat. Countless hours in Douglas Library, hitting the books, but he persevered.
He was determined. And remember, this is 1957, Sputnik launches. That whole world captivated by science, technology,
Imagine the buzz on campus, especially in engineering.
electric. And then T.D. Lee and Xian Yang, two physicists of Chinese descent, win the Nobel Prize.
He talks about the pride he felt. This young man from Hong Kong studying at Queen's, witnessing history in the making.
It's like the world was full of possibility.
Absolutely. But even with all the excitement, he hits a wall. Entering his final year, he starts feeling burnt out.
The pressure, the distance from home, it all adds up.
He doesn't go into detail, but you can hear it in his voice, you know.
It's a good reminder. Even the brightest minds need a break sometimes.
And that's when he discovers classical music, of all things. Remember, he used to tease his friends about Beethoven, Mozart.
From skeptic to convert, he talks about Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, Mozart's Emperor Piano Concerto. Like, the music opened up something inside him.
An escape, maybe? From the pressures of it all?
He calls it a revelation. Even remembers buying those records on his 21st birthday.
That's powerful.
And it seems like the music, it revitalized him. He not only graduates with honors, but he decides to stay at Queen's for his master's.
He mentions professors approaching him, maybe a scholarship offer.
It sounds like Queen's had become home.
Right. But he also had those summers working, gaining experience, surveying in Northern Ontario, remember? Living in the bush, building a bridge.
Not your typical summer job. And then Toronto, office life, a completely different world.
And then the nickel mine in Manitoba, seeing the Northern Lights for the first time.
It's like he's collecting experiences alongside his degrees.
Building a life, really.
Yeah.
And then it's back to Queen's. Radio astronomy, communication theory. Professor Chisholm, radio astronomy, communication theory. That's next level stuff. For those of us who might not be engineers, what was going on in those fields back then, early 1960s?
Picture this. Before smartphones, before Wi-Fi, even before transistors were everywhere. Radio astronomy. It was about building these huge antennas, trying to catch these faint signals from space. Stars, galaxies, millions of light years away.
Wow.
Cutting edge stuff. And communication theory, that was about understanding how to send information with radio waves, making it reliable over long distances.
Yeah.
Radar, eventually, even things like the internet, it all started there.
So he's gone from surveying in the Canadian wilderness to what? Listening to the universe?
Something like that. And he wasn't just theorizing. He talks about building circuits in the lab,
Yeah.
working with vacuum tubes. This was hands-on.
Real
The
engineer.
real deal. He even
Yeah.
jokes about his master's thesis, an antenna array simulator. Says it didn't exactly set the world on fire.
Well, they can't all be breakthroughs, right?
Exactly. But he learned a lot. He's actually pretty proud of the fact that, unlike some of his classmates, he didn't need his supervisor to proofread his English.
He thanks that English language program he took in Hong Kong.
Solid foundation makes a difference.
Absolutely. But it wasn't all work and no play. He mentions his grad school buddies. Bob, Stan, Garlam, Paul, Neil. Sounds like a good group.
They played bridge, had meals together, that kind of thing, supporting each other through the ups and downs.
Those connections again.
Always there. And as his master's winds down, he's got to figure out his next move. He's hooked on academia. A PhD seems like the obvious choice.
Applies to all the big names too, doesn't he? Toronto, UCL, even Cornell.
He gets accepted to UC Berkeley, but no funding right away.
Tough call. Go to a top program, but with that financial pressure hanging over you.
It takes guts. But you know what? He ends up choosing Cornell. His father was thrilled.
Really? Cornell.
Apparently, his father knew about it through a famous Chinese scholar, Hu Shi. Funny how those connections come full circle.
It's like a tapestry, isn't it? Family history, personal choices, a bit of fate thrown in.
Exactly. But with that decision, his time in Canada, it comes to an end. 6 years. We don't get to hear about Cornell in these chapters, at least. But you can tell this is just the beginning of a whole new adventure.
So, looking back, what do you think Queen's meant to him? What did he take away from that experience?
More than just a degree, that's for sure. He went there, a wide-eyed student, fresh from Hong Kong. He left as an engineer, someone passionate about learning, and a heck of a storyteller.
He really does paint a vivid picture.
He arrived with a suitcase full of dreams, and he left with a heart full of memories, friendships that would last a lifetime, and this deep appreciation for education, how it can change your life.
He even takes time to thank the Ontario government for their support, the mentors who guided him along the way.
That's a good reminder. Success, it's not just about hard work. It's about opportunity, and yes, a little bit of help from others.
Takes a village, right?
Something like that.
Mm.
And speaking of help, remember that green stick idea from Tolstoy, that key to happiness. What do you think it was for him, looking back on his journey?
Oh, that's a tough one. Maybe. The pursuit of knowledge, that thrill of discovering new things, and those human connections, those matter too. He even asks us, the readers, the same question at the end, doesn't he?
He does. What's your green stick? What are you searching for?
It's a reminder that his story, it's not just about the past, it's about us, right here, right now. What are we passionate about? What drives us? What are we searching for? That's a good place to leave it, I think.
It really is. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, keep searching for those green sticks that make life worth living.
Stories from Land of Maple Leaves as told by two AI scholars.